Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Calvaiire album, Forceps. These guys are a French rock quartet, and even though this is their debut LP, the band members do have ties to more established groups in France's hardcore and post-hardcore scene like Pigeon and As We Draw and Birds in Row, the last of which actually had a pretty decent album come out last year. However, I wasn't that crazy about the LP. There wasn't much on it melodically or riff-wise that stuck out to me, considering how many bands there are out there right now combining the ferocity and the speed of punk music with sludgy metal production. There's a lot of bands on Southern Lord doing this sound, some recent additions to Deathwish Incorporated, like Code Orange Kids or Oathbreaker, Nails, Trap Them, This Routine Is Hell. Kurt Ballou of Converge actually produces quite a few of the groups going for this sound. And I think even a moderate fan of extreme music will pick up the Converge influence in Calvaire's music right away, along with some sounds coming from the worlds of crust punk and D-beat and black metal and grindcore. There's some very complicated grooves that feel almost math rock inspired on this LP too. But I wouldn't really say that clear inspiration hurts the enjoyability of this album in any major way. It definitely doesn't lessen the impact of the unrelenting, tooth-clenched anger dished out on every song! Now, from what I've read about this LP, the band tracked it live, and it definitely sounds like that. A whirlwind of rock instrumentation, all turned up to 11 with gunshot drums and hellish vocals, heavy guitars. And the aggressive parts that are here are detailed and interesting enough to dive into, not just sort of let them pummel you to death. The opener on here starts off with some incredibly fast, intense, and off-kilter guitar riffs that are syncopated very tightly with the drums. And all of this rhythm, all of these riffs, they just move so fast, it's difficult to describe them as anything else but kind of a blur. Guitars pretty much dominate the entire track with the exception of a few moments around the 1 minute mark where some really gruesome group vocals sort of overtake them, but only for a little bit. And this track segues right into the next song like they're both the same song. It's just such a fast transition. And on this track, pummeling riffs are accented with really shrill guitar chords. The band starts chugging through a groove, slows down, and the tempo progressively gets slower and slower and slower until they hit this sludgy, depressive stride that kind of sounds like the harsh come down after the anger-laden crack they doled out on the first song. The band starts to show off their instrumental dynamics on the next track, EQUARRISSAGE. It's a 4-minute song, one of the longer tracks on this LP, which for the most part is filled with songs that barely reach the 2-minute mark. There's a very bleak build of guitar leads and primal drums on this part of the track, and then the song eventually breaks through into a series of brick-to-your-face riffs and blast beats. So many of these tracks shift and change so quickly what they're doing, but what it's changing from is one incredibly intense moment to another incredibly intense moment. But on the end of this particular track, there is a very beautiful and dreary set of slower guitar chords that are played through, where the vocals are actually in the background trying to add some element of harmony. So sometimes the changes that these songs undergo are significant, but still, I do wish that the vocals stuck out a little bit more and did bring maybe a bit of a gentler vibe at this point in the song. I guess in a sense it just kind of feels a little one note. I can also hear the vocals pushing outside of that screaming role on the song Curatelle. And this track has some really slow melodic guitar passages that make for one of the more emotionally powerful moments on this album. But still on this track I'm sort of left wishing that the vocals brought more of a sea change. The instrumental dynamics on this LP continue on tracks like Oh Porks, the longest track on this entire LP at 6 minutes. It kicks off with some marching snare drums and some very dismal guitar chords. This moment in the song is very thin, it's very trebly, but then eventually the bass kicks in, the song gets really thunderous and unrelenting, and the longer it goes, the more the track feels like being tossed down a bottomless pit and your surroundings slowly grow darker and darker and darker. And even though the slower spots on here, the more melodic spots to me are the ones that truly stick out, there are riffs on this album that, though for the very short amount of time that they play, do feel very catchy, they feel visceral, they really whip me into a frenzy of just wanting to bob my head and wave and flail my arms violently. There are some guitar tone changes here and there as well, but for the most part, you're going to be hearing the thunderous riffs that you catch right at the beginning of the album. And again, to go back to the one major issue that this LP has, a lot of this LP just kind of coasts by in a bit of a frenzy. Not that this album is forgettable, because you will most definitely not forget the impact and the aggression that this band brings to the table, but the details of it do end up being fuzzy, even after multiple listens. And it's not really for lack of tight playing or fantastic production or great ideas. This LP has that. I actually think there are some better writing ideas on this thing than there are on some albums that are similarly frenzied metallic hardcore fusions. The songs on this record aren't really organized in a very cohesive way, and if one of the goals here is to be as disorienting as possible, mission accomplished. The music is slightly nihilistic in this way, but it is strangely satisfying despite it. All of this nihilism kind of comes to a head on the last track, where every single instrument in the mix is trying to make as much noise as possible, as fast as possible, just before the audio of the song just cuts out into pure silence, which in a nutshell is kind of this album. However, for the short period of time that this LP does last, the noise that it's making is incredibly intense, loud, well recorded, just there's an impressive level of energy and stamina and rhythmic complexity to a lot of these songs that just keeps me coming back despite the fact that some things just aren't sticking. I'm feeling a light 7 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this LP a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano. Forever.